In episode 22 of the SOC Level 2 training series, we're going to go through the threat hunting pivoting room, which is part of the threat hunting module of the SOC Level 2 pathway of TryHackMe. And as a part of this room, we have obviously the introduction to the room where we get the scenario and the prerequisites. Then we have the discovery portion, privilege escalation, credential access, and lateral movement, and finally the conclusion. And essentially what we're going to be using is the Kibana tool, the Kibana SIM from the Elk Stack suite of software, which is used for threat hunting and security analysis, etc. So SOC Level 2 is obviously the more advanced version of the stuff that we learned in SOC Level 1. By the end of SOC Level 1, you are equipped to be a junior security analyst. And then when we go to the end of SOC Level 2, you would be a beginning kind of regular security analyst, like a beginner regular security analyst. So that is the intention of this video today, and that's the outline of this video, the overview of this video today. If you're serious about your CySec training and want to get access to me on Discord, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, bug bounties, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@hankhackshackers/join, and you will be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us jump into the threat hunting pivoting room. Here's the intro. The questions that we need to be able to answer as security analysts are: is your organization's network robust enough to spot lateral movements of adversaries within your system? Can you detect unusual network activities or illicit privilege escalation that could indicate a pivot attack? Can you use network telemetry and analytics to identify abnormal behavior and halt lateral movement before it wreaks havoc? These are essential questions to mull over when considering the critical pivoting stage in the cyber kill chain. Cyber threat actors every day devise innovative methods to move laterally within compromised networks, exploiting credentials, network misconfigurations, or unpatched software to extend their foothold. As a security team, you're responsible for safeguarding the network perimeter and continuously monitoring for anomalous internal activities to intercept the attackers during their stealthy lateral movement. And the task can be overwhelming given the subtle nature of pivot attacks and the tenacity of modern cyber criminals. And this is what we see right here. I actually like this graphic probably more than most of the other graphics that we've seen. You got the bug, and the bug is going into all these different computers, but then we have the scope that is around this bug that we're zooming in, we're honing in on that scope, or on that bug, excuse me. So the learning objectives of this room are to hunt malicious activity indicating potential internal network pivoting, and we want to understand the attacker's mindset in moving inside the compromised network, correlating succeeding actions executed by an attacker after establishing persistent access, and then differentiating suspicious host and network events from benign ones, getting acquainted with the MITRE tactics involved once an attacker attempts to jump from one machine to another. The prerequisites would be Windows event logs, core Windows processes, the advanced ELK queries, threat hunting introduction, threat hunting foothold, and all of these are already inside of this playlist, so you can go watch them if you have not watched them already. It's been a while since I've been recording for SOC Level 2, so I think before I left SOC Level 2, my face wasn't being revealed in videos. So now that we are back on SOC Level 2, now you actually get to see my face. So that's an interesting little, or maybe it's not interesting to you, I don't know, but it's certainly a development, I should say that. So the virtual machine that we have inside of this exercise is going to be the TryHackMe virtual machine that actually gives us access to the Elastic Stack tool, and we need to access it via the Firefox browser. So I have to also start the attack box, which is what you actually see on the right hand side. It's a Linux machine that they give us access to, and the Linux machine is already connected to the the TryHackMe server, so I don't need to connect via a VPN using OpenVPN, but you can actually do that. So if you have a membership with TryHackMe, you can connect via OpenVPN and then connect from your own computer. And as long as you have this virtual machine button, the start machine button right here, as long as you have that, in about 3 minutes or so after you click that button, the Elastic Stack instance goes up, and then you get a chance to use it. For this exercise, this is the URL that's been assigned to me. That's the username and password for our Kibana instance, for our Elastic instance. And obviously, if you don't already know, this IP address is going to expire as soon as I'm done with this video. So believe it or not, you're not going to be able to access it. And even if it didn't expire, you still need to be able to connect to the TryHackMe server via OpenVPN to even be able to access an IP address that is hosted by TryHackMe. So we have the ELK instance that contains the following indices that will be used in the threat hunting activity. We have the winlog beat, and then we have the packet beat. Winlog beat contains all of the events, the Windows event logs and sysmon that are generated by Windows machines. The packet beat contains network traffic events generated by the workstations and servers. And the emulated network runs the following workstations and servers. So we have the host, INTSRV, so internal server, I believe. So it's a Windows server running an internal web application used by the organization. We have workstation 1 and 2, and then we have the domain controller 01 of the internal network. So they've at least given us this information so we can technically kind of hunt down based on that information. And that's pretty much it. There is one thing that I will say before we actually jump into the content. Everything that we do inside of a threat hunting or inside of an investigation with any kind of tool compiles on top of each other, right? So you get the basic information. You have the information here that says these are the various hosts that you can search for, right? So if they ask a question about a server, most likely we can go and narrow the events down by the server host. If they're asking for some kind of a workstation or an employee, something like that, we can look for the workstations. If they're asking a question about the domain controller, we can look for the domain controller. And then as we discover more information, we compile the information. It accumulates on top of each other, right? And so as you go deeper into the investigation, you should have more information that will help you narrow down your search even more. It'll help you narrow down your queries and build more advanced queries as we go along. So that's kind of a quick little tip for you. And you should already know that. If you've gone through anything with SOC level 1, you should already know that. If you've gone through any of the videos that we've done for threat hunting or for SIM tools or anything like that, you should have a good idea of that already. So that being said, we now can go into the discovery tactic. The discovery tactic, and this is the tactic ID number inside of MITRE, I believe. So if we actually open this up, we're going to, this is the MITRE attack framework's discovery tactic description page, I want to say. So essentially, this is what the ID is for that tactic, and it was discovered or created. This specific page was created October of 2018, last modified July of 2019. These are the various techniques that are associated with it. And I mean, there's, I would say, hundreds of different attack groups or threat actors that exist inside of the MITRE attack framework, probably thousands maybe. And for each one of them, there is, for the most part, I would say, a discovery tactic. So if you also go to the MITRE attack homepage, so attack.mitre.org, which is what we see at the top right here. Let me make sure my keyboard is awake that I can zoom in. There we go. So this is attack.mitre.org is where we are. And you can see that this is the attack matrix. And these are the various tactics, that exist. And then for each one of these tactics, there's a list of techniques that exist. So if we actually go to the portion where it says discovery, we can see that under discovery, we have 32 techniques that exist. And then under each one of these, if we click on them, there's going to be a variety of different examples and the detection mechanisms for them, so on and so forth. And then even under account discovery, so let's see if I can expand it. There we go. So once we expand it, we also see subcategories of attacks, and then we can collapse that and etc. So there's a lot of different stuff that's available, and this is a great threat intelligence resource for anybody who wants to go into security analysis. And even if you want to go into pen testing and ethical hacking, it's just a really, really good idea to be familiar with this website. We have referred to this website probably dozens of times by now. It's the most consistent website that we refer to because it is a globally accessible knowledge base of tactics, techniques based on real world observations. And I've gone through this already. There's videos that have been dedicated to MITRE attacks, so I'm not going to spend the entire time trying to introduce you to it. It's just that we need to know where this information is coming from and what we're referencing. So it refers to the actions that an attacker may take to understand better the systems and networks that they have infiltrated. This involves identifying systems and network configurations, finding sensitive data, or identifying the potential targets within the network. And it could be obtaining current user information and privileges like groups and accessible assets, enumerating host information like the operating system, installed applications, implemented security controls, understanding internal network topology through the host and services that are scanning or scanning hosts and services, listing internal domain information like domain users, groups, and access control lists. And these are typically used to enumerate information for the disposal of the following tactics that we're going to be going through. So this step is crucial in further identifying the attacker's next step to infiltrate the internal infrastructure, And to understand it further, we're going to go into the detailed scenario. So first, we need to understand the tactic. The techniques adversaries use are not limited to the examples that we just saw. Again, there's a lot of stuff. So there's 32 techniques that go under discovery. So there are a lot of different ways that people can actually go through to enumerate the information that they need. We're going to use these specific examples to look at it. So discovery technique is user reconnaissance. So built-in commands like who am I, net user, net local group, or QWinsta, I want to say, for account enumeration, and dir and ls for file and folder enumeration. Host reconnaissance would be hostname, WMIC, ipconfig, system info, net start, SCEXE query. And these are for the service enumeration and just navigating through the GUI-based applications like Windows Security to determine security controls running in the compromised host. Internal scanning would be something like the ARP command to see how many hops that something takes to go between the routers inside of the internal network or to connect to the external network, right? To the internet at large. The address resolution protocol is what ARP stands for. Sweeping reachable assets via ping and seeing if they're up and running and if we can connect to them. Internal domain reconnaissance would be the net asterisk /domain, and the asterisk is a wildcard character. So essentially we're saying show me everything inside of the domain, or NL test the domain control list, or loading known PowerShell commands and scripts to domain users, which PowerView or Bloodhound would use to enumerate domain objects. So all the commands that are typically used to display host or user information can be used by an attacker in this tactic quickly. The ways to enumerate data are not limited to the provided commands, again, because we have a massive list of discovery techniques. So most examples are above are for Windows. So there are a lot of variations for Linux or Unix operating systems, So when we want to hunt for this, specific tactic, the discovery tactic, we need to learn how to detect the information gathering activities that are typically blending with the host and network administration commands. And this can identify tools like system administrators use or the activities that gather host and network data, and differentiating benign activities from suspicious ones based on unusual patterns. So we're going to do the host reconnaissance activity, internal network scanning, active directory execution, and host reconnaissance would be using the winlog beat index to hunt for unusual behavior of the host information reconnaissance. and it's on July 9th of 2023 is the date that we're interested in. So ensure all the queries in the Kibana console are set to look for the right index and time frame. And then the system administrator typically use built-in tools for host information gathering, whether commands for identifying the OS version of the host or the process running inside the machine. Threat actors commonly abuse it to collect information or important host information, and they can leverage that information to tailor potential attack vectors. So we're going to look for behaviors that show numerous uses of the built-in tools, which is whoami.exe, hostname.exe, net.exe, systeminfo, ipconfig, netstat, and tasklist.exe. When you create a query for it, you're going to hunt for that process creation generated by the tools. So in this particular case, the process creation event ID is 1 when you're looking at the sysmon events that were generated. So if you're using the winlog event ID number 1 and the process name is whoami.exe or hostname.exe or and literally you're just listing all of these things, and just notice that inside of the parentheses is where that section of the query has been compiled, right? So we've compartmentalized it. That's probably a better word. That specific section has been compartmentalized into its own little piece by putting it inside of the parentheses. And so all of this applies to this specific field name, which is the process name. So in addition, we want to make sure that the following fields are actually added, which is the hostname, username, process, and then you'll see what this actually looks like. We're just getting screenshots over here to kind of demonstrate it for us. When you select these various fields, then I'll show you what the difference actually is in case you've never seen this before. But when you select them, it kind of organizes the information based on those columns, based on those fields, instead of just showing you this one giant block of data, which is usually very hard to decipher from. And that's what the power of a tool like ElkStack Kibana is that it actually allows you to organize data, or normalize data is the technical term. So it can be seen that Bill Hawkins has executed multiple enumeration tools on Workstation 2. Moreover, all the commands spawned by cmd.exe. Quick look, this might not indicate any usual activity, since system administrators typically do remote login and spawn Windows command processor to execute troubleshooting and host identification commands. So we're going to dig deeper. So to do this, we're going to look for the parent process of these logs to get the process identifier of the unusual CMD. So then we're going to do the drop down of the first execution of the whoami and find the process parent PID. You can also go to this list that you've created right here, that you've created these columns, and you can just do process parent PID from the fields that are available in the sidebar right here, and then you'll be able to see the process parent PID. So once we break this down, we can get to see that for this specific one, right, so you have the process name, which is whoami.exe, and the parent PID is 6324. I don't know why they separated by a comma. Maybe it's just like any integer inside of this tool is separated by a comma. But yeah, that's pretty much what it is. The process PID itself is 2432, so the whoami executable. And then the parent PID for this, which is CMD, is 6324. So using that, we can now create a new query for the CMD process creation on this workstation, and it would be hostname workstation 2 asterisk, meaning anything that has workstation 2 at the starting of it, and then the winlog event ID 1 for process creation, and then process PID 6324. And so if we look at this right here, we had 36 hits from this query, and then when we go down over here, we see that we have 2 hits. So it's a much smaller output, a much smaller results list. And then since we did the workstation 2 asterisk, we're going to see, I mean, in this case, it's literally the same workstation, the threathunting.thm. But then you have the Bill Hawkins username, and then you have network surface as the username. So same host, but different usernames. And then the very first one is the suspicious one, because we can actually see the command line from the parent. And the parent process command line is a pretty important one. Anything that you see Windows style hidden, that's automatically a red flag for me. Anytime I see Windows style hidden, it's like, oh, okay, this person, whoever this hacker was, whoever this malicious actor was, they wanted this to not show, because just in case Bill Hawkins is actually logged into his computer, they don't want Bill Hawkins to get suspicious. So when the windows get spawned, they're going to disappear. They're going to be hidden. And all of this is going to be written, or it's going to be ran in the background. And so, if I establish a remote connection to Bill Hawkins' computer and I want to run all of these commands, who am I and what's my privileges and all of that, I don't want Bill Hawkins to actually see that I'm doing this. So Windows style hidden is like a key. It jumps out on the screen for me anytime that I see a command. It's the first thing that almost like automatically is noticed by my neural pathways. Like I see it, I'm like, oh, Windows style hidden. It's like it just pops out. And then the rest of it is like, oh, okay, so he's going to OneDrive XYZ and he's using the install text file, and all of these things end up just adding more evidence to the fact that this is probably a malicious connection that is taking place. So based on the results, let me zoom in properly here so we can kind of see what's going on. Based on the result, it seems that CMD was spawned by PowerShell containing suspicious indicators like IEX download string, Windows style hidden, and the EP bypass. From a security analyst perspective, this may indicate that the script downloaded by PowerShell may be a reverse shell script or a command and control agent, which confirms the suspicion of enumeration commands on Workstation 2. Following this mindset, the threat hunter mindset, the next step of the investigation is to identify the extent of the attack by checking child processes that were spawned using the malicious PowerShell process. And it's also essential to understand the execution of PowerShell and how it started. So if you've gone through the threat hunting foothold, you should be able to kind of remember that. If you just go one video prior to this video inside of the SOC Level 2 playlist, you'll be able to find that as the information over that. Then we have the internal network scanning. So packet beat index would be the one that we would be looking at for that. And it's going to, again, be on the July 9th, 2023. So we're going to correlate the network activity, identify the process that the network connection through the winlog beat index that we found, and ensure that all the queries are set to look for the right index and the time frame, obviously. So the internal network connection are always presumed to be benign due to the assumption that they originate from the legitimate host service. The threat actor tends to blend this from the noise while enumerating reachable assets for potential pivot points. And one example is scanning open ports on a reachable device, which generates several connections to unique destination ports. And we're going to hunt for this specific query or for this activity. We're going to go to the visualize library and create a visualization table using the lenses, and we're going to configure it to set the table index for the packet beat. The rows are going to be hostname, source IP, destination, and the metrics unique. The unique count of the destination port is what we want to actually visualize. So the KQL query below will view all the internal network connections. So source IP is anything basically on this subnet of 8, which basically means that the first octet has been assigned and the rest of it, which is a really massive subnet. This is like a big company. If this is actually their subnet, it's a massive subnet. And the destination IP, which is going to be exactly the same thing. So we're basically creating a very broad net here. And the destination port is going to be less than 1024. So essentially any port that is less than 1024, so 1023 or less is what we're interested in. And we can see this right here. So we have the internal server and then Workstation 2 that have the unique count of destination ports, which is 1023. And you can see that for whatever reason, this person knew exactly that 1024 is the number of queries that they want to see. So it's not, I was mistaken. It's not actually that they're looking for or maybe it is the unique count of destination port. I wonder, let's see if what that actually explains it to us. It doesn't explain it to us, but connections to the well-known ports. So yeah, I was right. So this is actually all of the well-known ports. It's not the number of connections to a given port. It's just the number of well-known ports from the port number 1 to port 1023 is what we're looking at. So highlight number 4, it can be observed that the table provided the workstations indicating a potential port scanning activity. These two hosts, internal server and workstation, are highly noticeable or notable since they generated connections to 1023 unique destination ports. Given all this information, we can now pivot to the winlog beat and index to use the Discover console and correlate this network activity associated. And we're going to create this query. So winlog event ID 3 for the network connections. Source IP is going to be 10.10.184.105, which is what you can see right here. These are the IPs that were the source IPs. And the destination IP is 10.10.122.219, which is the host that was being scanned. And destination port is going to be less than 1024, so any port less than 1024 that we want to see scanned. And then we want to see hostname, username, process name, and destination port as our columns, and then you get to see right here. So this is using the sysmon event ID 3 for network connections. We're able to correlate the potential port scanning activity to a process named n.exe. This is what you see right here. n.exe is the process name that's actually doing it. And it could be nmap potentially that has been renamed. This can backtrack to the events that were before the execution of port scanning. The attacker may utilize information gathered, so it's good to investigate unusual network connections. Active Directory enumeration will also be done inside of winlog beat on July 9th. I wonder if we're even going to do any. I feel like we are, because most of these things are at the very, very top towards the beginning. Some of them were blocked off. So some of the results, yeah, right here. So these things were blocked off. I don't know if they were blocked off because they didn't want us to kind of like guess from the documentation, from the instructions, or if we're going to actually run these exercises. It kind of feels like they're just giving all of the information for us to be able to pull the answers from. So anyways. So it can be concluded that the originating host was workstation 2, the target was internal server 1, and it's suspicious since all these connections were initiated by a user account, not a system or a service account. Only successful connections established are logged by event ID 3, meaning all these ports were actually identified as an open port. So that's a really good note to actually know. Following a threat hunter mindset, the next step of this is to identify the events that were generated by n.exe and its parent process, and we can backtrack the events before the execution of the port scanning activity. Moreover, the attacker may utilize the information that was gathered, so it's good to investigate unusual network connections. So we're going to go through winlog beat, the winlog beat index, to hunt for potential domain reconnaissance, and this is again on the same date. Domain enumeration typically generates many LDAP, lightweight directory access protocol queries. However, it's also atypical for internal network running as an active directory to create this activity. Given this, the threat actors tend to blend in the regular traffic to mask their suspicious activity of harvesting Active Directory objects to tailor their potential internal attacks. Based on this, we will focus on unusual LDAP connections. Using the Discover tab, we will focus on hunting processes that initiated an LDAP network connection, port 389 for LDAP and 636 for LDAP over SSL. So 389 is for the unencrypted, the decrypted version of LDAP, and 636 is for the secured encrypted version of LDAP. So we will create this query, winlog event ID 3 for network connections. Source IP is going to be the subnet, destination IP is going to be the subnet, and destination port will be either 389 or 636, and we don't want the process name to be mmc.exe. We've excluded this because it typically generates benign LDAP connections, the mmc.exe. I am very curious as to what this is, so let's see what that gives us. It's the Microsoft Management Console, and it's a Windows tool that provides the framework for running administrative tools called snap-ins to manage various aspects of the operating system. All right, so we then want to narrow down by these columns, and so we can see that the Workstation 2 for Bill Hawkins has this process name called SharpHound exe on port 389, which is the unencrypted port that we have over here. And SharpHound exe is a notable binary that's used for reconnaissance and data collection within Active Directory. So following a threat hunter, the next step is to identify the subsequent actions made after the execution of Sharphound. Undoubtedly, the attacker will leverage the information gathered through this and attempt to abuse Active Directory. Moreover, it's also essential to investigate the parent process activity. So what is the name of the account seen to be executing host enumeration commands on DC1? All right, so I have now created a full screen view of our attack box here. We're going to be using our Firefox tool or Firefox browser to connect to our Elastic instance. So it's the HTTP 10.10.190.93 is what we're going to use for that. And there we go. Elastic is already up. So we just need to log in now and go to the Discover tab so that we can get the host reconnaissance that's being done. So if you remember, there was like one long command or query that was generated for the host reconnaissance. And to be able to pull this off, we need to first go into Discover, which is let me see if I can stay zoomed in here. So we're going to go to Discover right here. And from there, we're going to be presented with the overview. What is going on? I now have zoomed out completely. So let me see if I can zoom back in, because this is ridiculous. That's way too zoomed out. You know what I'm saying? So I'll zoom in one more. I want my view to be like the normal view. Oh, there we go. 100%. There we go. That's cool. Okay. So the first thing was that we need to look at the appropriate time, right? So it's July 9th, 2023, and we need to be inside of the Winlog beat index. So I'm already inside of the Winlog beat index, as you can see right here. It kind of loads that by default, but the date is incorrect. So the date needs to be adjusted. By default, when you go into Elastic, it always shows you the last 15 minutes. So you can click on show date, and then it gives you two options. So 15 minutes ago to now. So I'm going to click on this. I want to go to absolute, and then from here, I'm just going to do the 2023 July 9th. So we're going to go to 2023. We're going to go to July, and then we're going to do 9. And then we want to start from the very, very beginning. So 00 is the timestamp. And then we're going to go back to the now portion, go to absolute, then change this to 2023. And then we're going to do July, and then we're going to do 9. And then we're going to go to the very end timestamp, which is 2330. And that's it. And then we're going to update. And now we should actually see some events on the screen. We have 49,000 events. So that's a lot of stuff. And so this is what I meant when I said that you get one giant block of information if you don't organize it by those columns. So the first thing that we need to do is write the query that we needed to be able to discover the host enumeration activity, essentially. So that was done by doing the winlog event ID 1, which is that event ID for process creation, and the process name is going to be the stuff that we saw inside of the parentheses. So it's going to be this. So a massive list of stuff, but this is where we start, right? We just want to kind of start wide, and then we want to zoom in. We want to narrow in. So I'm going to press enter on this, and it will go from 49,000 to 36 hits. So excellent. So now the thing is, we want to see the stuff that was done against DC01. So here's the thing that just based on the information that they gave us, this is the stuff that we want to kind of filter by. And we're going to go inside of this search field name, or not filter by, view by. We want the host name to be added, and I do this, and then it changes the view from the right hand side. So now you see it's all host name, and then DC01 is the one that I'm interested in, right? So then I'm going to change this back to include the username, user.name, and then we're going to add the username, and then we're going to add the process parent command line and the process command line. So there we go. So now it's zoomed in, right? Or not zoomed in, it's been narrowed. The view that we saw, instead of one giant block, we now can see that it's been narrowed down. So there's a way that we can go look at everything that's here based on the workstation, right? So, or the host name, right? So if we want to see everything that's been done against the DC01 host that we have over here, we can see that the host name is right here, and it says hostname equals DC01. So one of the easy ways is to just go over here and do and, right, in all caps, and then we can say host dot name. There we go, host dot name, and then we do the colon, and then we can do DC01 and then asterisk because we want a wildcard to fill in the rest of it for us. Press enter, and it says nothing. So let me see, maybe I did this incorrectly. So I'll do a space here, I will remove the quotations and press enter, and now there we go. Now we actually have it, and there are only 2 hits that are available, and the username is backup ADM. So backup admin would be the name of the account, ADM. There we go. That's the name of the account that did the execution of the host enumeration commands on DC01. The internet is going to catch up. There we go. We got it. So cool. Now, following the port scanning activity investigation, what is the parent process of n.exe? And the hint over here says, find the process creation events of n.exe to see the details of the parent process. So process creation is, again, the winlog event 1, which is for process creation. Process name in this particular case is going to be n.exe. So this one is, it should be a little bit simpler. So we're just going to delete most of these guys. Actually, I'm going to delete the whole thing because I don't want the parentheses to be here. And I'm just going to do process name is going to be n.exe. We're going to press enter, and we get 3 hits. So n.exe process creation. And the question, it says, following the port scanning activity, what is the parent process of n.exe? So parent process is what I'm interested in. I believe it's PowerShell.exe, but you can actually even go over here and just do parent process name, I want to say. So if I do process.parent, it'll give me name. So process parent name, I can just add that. And then at the very end right here, we'll see that it's PowerShell.exe. So we can go over here, do PowerShell.exe, press enter, that should be good. And what is the full command line value of the sharphound exe process? So sharphound exe process, that was shown inside of the winlog event ID 3 right here. So we need to now go, because it is a network connection type of a thing. So we'll do winlog event ID 3 is what I'm going to change this to. And the process name is going to go from n to sharphound exe. I wonder if it needs to be, I think it does need to be case sensitive. So I will do capital S, and then I will do a capital H. And I'll do that. And there we go. Now we actually have 6 hits. So we need the, what do we need? We need the full command line value of this. So the process command line is empty, interestingly enough. So I'll just get rid of that. The parent process command line is also empty. Parent process name is also empty. We have username, which is Bill Hawkins. The process name is sharphound exe. So we can open, I would say, any of these, and we can look at the values inside of this to see what the full command line execution of this is going to be. So let's see if we can find it. Okay, so there are no process command lines for any of these things, which is actually, I believe this is where the hint comes in, because it tells us to look at event ID 1. So I automatically assumed that because it's a network connection, that's what we need to do, and that's what they kind of display to us inside of the task screenshots. So if we just do the event ID 1, which is for process creation, and then I go back to the process command line right there, we should be able to see that we actually do have a command line value, which is this whole piece right here. I wonder if I do need the quotes. So we will include the quotes for this, and let's paste that in here and submit it. And there you go. Okay, so that is indeed the answer. So very good. So we were able to gather all of the answers to these questions, and for the most part, so far, it's been fairly simple. It's been fairly straightforward, and just by following some of the instructions that was available to us over here, we'll be able to collect that information. So now we can go to the privilege escalation portion of this exercise. The privilege escalation tactic involves techniques that allow the attacker to gain higher privileges or permissions on a system. This is a very important step because they can get increased access and control. They can use that to target sensitive data and modify critical system components. And this could be something like exploiting of privilege escalation vulnerabilities inside the machine, using valid accounts with actual higher privileges, abusing misconfigured access controls, which is very, very common. This is like one of the big ones. And even on the OWASP top 10 list, this was one of the top 3, I want to say. Maybe even the first one, which was like the misconfigured access controls. The leveraging host misconfiguration on services and applications. So these are typically used to elevate the attacker's foothold, which takes them from lower privilege access to full control of the access. And then if they get access to the domain controller system, that's pretty much control of the entire domain, every computer in the domain, every user in the domain, and that's kind of like the holy grail for the attacker, is to be able to get access to that specific system. So it allows for the broader manipulation of the system or the network, and they can execute the phases, the latter phases of their attack, like the data exfiltration if they want to, or if they want to crash your system, or if they want to steal money or install ransomware, any of that stuff. So understanding the privilege escalation tactic, first of all, you need to know that obviously privilege escalation just by itself has a variety of different techniques under it. So it's more than what we just talked about, 14 techniques. And then under each technique, there's a variety of different approaches as well. So we can easily say, just based on boot or logon auto start execution, there's 14 items under that. So we can literally say that there's dozens of different techniques and sub-techniques that are under privilege escalation. So obviously, this is not all inclusive, right? So looking at just this list that we have the exploitation of the vulnerabilities, so user land or kernel exploits on the unpatched hosts, using valid accounts, so running as the newly discovered credential or re-authentication with a privileged account, access control abuse, which would be anything on an access control list that has been misconfigured that allows other accounts to grant or require additional permission. And then host misconfigurations that are the insecure service misconfigurations, like a modifiable or restartable service or overwritable service binaries. All of those things are really big no-nos. If somebody can overwrite a service binary, that means that the binary is basically one of these scripts or one of these files that is required for the system to run. And if they can overwrite it, what they're going to do is they're not going to make the binary stop working, but they're going to add something inside of that binary's code so that as it runs, it also executes the thing that the attacker wants it to execute. So that's how they gain foothold. That's how they escalate their privileges. So the tactic focuses on elevating access privileges in various ways, and the elevated access, the escalated access paves the way for deeper manipulation on the system, like sensitive data access or diving deeper into the network, bringing them one step closer to their ultimate objective. To be able to hunt for this, we need to be able to understand their mindset and try to go into what their playbook would be, which is why this is so important, why the MITRE framework, the attack matrix, is so important, because this is the playbook. We've gathered, or I say we, I had nothing to do with it. They have gathered everything that they possibly can based on actual attacks that were taking place and put them inside of this giant database for you so that you can understand what their playbook is. So there are a variety of techniques that you can use to escalate privileges, and we can think that hunting successful privilege escalation can be as easy as looking for unusual events executed by the privileged account, but differentiating them from benign activity could also be bothersome, since those accounts actually do a lot of things by, like using or creating a new user. For example, the domain controller will most likely create new users. They'll most likely configure the configurations of the system and the security. That's their job. So when you see something like that happening, it's like, okay, this is kind of in their job description. I don't know if this was malicious or not. So to be able to figure this out, to be able to differentiate, we need to have a different lens on this, right? So elevating access through the SE impersonate privilege abuse, which is one that we talked about in SOC Level 1, the capstone challenges of SOC Level 1. The SE impersonate privilege abuse, as the name implies, is to impersonate the privileges of the specific. So let me actually do what is, so we can get a quick little overview of what that actually does. But this was something that we found on GitHub that was right here. So SE impersonate privilege, and it's a Windows local privilege escalation. And this is what it does when you go into it, when you try to access it. So it's a Windows privilege that grants a user or process the ability to impersonate the security context of another user. And this allows the process to assume the identity of a different user, enabling them to perform actions or access resources as if they were that user. So again, as the name implies, they are impersonating that person, that system, that user, abusing excessive service permissions. And these are the two things that we really want to be on the lookout for. So abusing the impersonation is going to be inside of the winlog beat for the system account. So we want to look at processes that are spawned by the system account, of course, on July 9th. The successful privilege escalation always indicate activities generated by a privileged account. In the context of machine vulnerabilities, the user access is typically elevated to the anti-authority system account, which is the system account. Given this, we will attempt to hunt for processes executed by a low privileged account that leads to a system account access. So this is the query. We're going to look for process creation. We want the username to be system and not the event data parent user to be anti-user system, because the anti-authority user system would be the legitimate parent. If the user is system but the parent is somebody else, that's a clear indication that this is actually somebody that has escalated their privileges. We then want to see hostname, username, parent command line by the process, and the event data parent user. And then we get to see the information right here. So based on that, we can see that there was a process spawned by IIS app pool, default app pool user, and they executed a binary named spoofer exe, which is, I mean, that's a red flag, just a name. And I get that it's for these exercises that they try to make it as, obvious as possible. But in the real world, it is not going to be that obvious. They're not going to have a process that's named spoofer. It's just not going to work. And it's been generated by the system account. The account is the default account for running an IIS web server and does not commonly execute unusual processes. And this might indicate the remote code execution from a web server and a successful privilege escalation. So we dig deeper and we look for the spoofer executable by looking at process creation and the process name being spoofer. And then we can see that it actually has some detailed information. So if you expand it, it's literally one hit that was shown up on this. So if you just expand it and you start looking at the details of that event, we get to see the MD5 hash values over here. We get to see the arguments of the process, which is this long executed command that we see right here. And then the parent command line as well. So the process parent arguments and the process parent command line. And then we can go to VirusTotal and run those hash values. And when you run it, you get to see, boom, print spoofer64exe is the original name of that binary. And it's been marked by 54 of the vendors, the security vendors. So it is malicious, okay? And abusing the SE impersonate privilege to gain privileged access. Then it explains why the default app pool account was able to spawn a child owned by the system account, and this is because default app pool by default has impersonate privilege, and the attacker exploited this to achieve the successful privilege escalation. Following the threat hunter mindset, the next step is to identify the subsequent actions that were made by the attacker. And so we want to look at service permission abuse, and we're going to use again the same index and the same time frame. And aside from abusing the privileges, the threat actor could hunt for excessive permissions that were assigned to the current account access, right? So one example is the service permission allowing low privileged users to modify and restart services running on a privileged account. So we'll hunt for the event ID 13, which is for the registry value set, and then we will use this query. So the registry path, so obviously the event ID is 13. The registry path is going to be HKLM / system / The reason why you do 2 backslashes, by the way, is typically what happens with these queries is it's very similar to when you create a regular expression. And so if you want a literal backslash to be included in your query, you need to escape the pattern by using a backslash, because a backslash in regular expression is used to escape the pattern so that you can use a literal letter or symbol or something like that after it, and you want that to be included in your query. So if you want a literal backslash, then you need to escape the pattern and say, okay, I'm escaping here. This one is a literal backslash. I'm escaping here. That's a literal backslash, etc. So the path is the HKLM system, current control set services, and then you look for essentially anything that has image path at the start of it. So we want to look for registry modifications on the services of the image path registry, which is the field that handles what binary will be executed by the service. We're going to look for hostname, process name, registry path, and the event data details, which handles the data written in the registry. And then you can see the information as displayed on the screen. So there's the modification of 2 services, image path value, which is the Bill Hawkins documents update, and then they're notable after executing all registry modifications with SVC host, and is a typical location for image path. And then we have, or a typical value, that's inside the image path. And then if we dig deeper into it by looking at this surrounding document. So this is another one of those really cool things that's available by using a SIM. You click on this and it'll expand something for you, and then you get to look at all of these surrounding documents. Now I gotta kind of zoom in here. This is the registry path of the image path, SNMP trap. Come on now, that's like such an obvious name. And then of course the event data details would be the Bill Hawkins document update, and the process name services, etc. So you get to see some information. And what they've done in this case is that on the view documents, they have then added a filter for the event ID to be 1 for process creation. So they add that event ID so that you can look at all the process creation events around this SNMP trap. And then we can see that all process creation events we can analyze further. So looking at sc.exe, for example, which is the expanded version of one of these events here, before the modification of the registry, it can be seen that the service modification was done using sc.exe with the arguments configuration, config, SNMP trap, binary path equals this. And so the SNMP traps service, right? So the service executable, the configuration of that service is that I want the binary path of that service to be this update executable, which is probably the malicious executable. And we can see that the user who initiated is Bill Hawkins, which is possibly not a privileged account, as we've kind of established already. So you see the process argument at the top right here. This is the actual commands that were run, right? So sc configuration SNMP trap, that's what we just saw. And then at the very bottom, we see that the related user is Bill Hawkins and the user's domain is threat hunting. And then we can see that the subsequent CMD, so subsequent meaning the one right after, right? Or a few events after, is the CMD process after the registry was set. And then you can see that the argument, again, is what? The CMD process running the service executable to start that service that has that malicious binary associated with it. So, and it's being done using a privileged account, or this may indicate that the service may have been executed, or the service may have executed the binary in a privileged account context. And then we can now narrow that down by our query for looking for process creation. The parent process name is now services.exe, and the process name is that update.exe. And then as we look at it, we can see that these things are connected all together. So you have services.exe using the system username and then running this thing, but the host name is the threat hunting, or I guess we don't have the regular username, or the parent process username is something that would be interesting because it would probably not show the NT system user, right? So based on this, the system account spawned the update binary. This confirms the suspicion of the SNMP trap service permission abuse, leading to a successful privilege escalation to the system. Following the threat hunter mindset, the next step of this is to identify the subsequent actions made by the attacker using the privileged system account. Moreover, it's also good to trace the events generated by the parent process of SCEXE to understand the events before the successful privilege escalation attempt. So what's the full command line value of the process spawned by spoofer exe? What is the name of the other service that was abused besides SNMP trap? And what is the MD5 hash of the update exe binary? And I wonder if that was actually even over here. I feel like we actually saw it over here, didn't we? MD5 exe of the update exe binary. It's right here. I can't copy paste that, so it would be almost impossible. I feel like that's not it though. I don't think that's the, I think that's the MD5 of SCEXE. I don't think it's definitely not the MD5 of the update exe. So that is incorrect. They definitely want us to go and hunt down this information, which I actually genuinely love because we get to flex our muscles by doing the investigation. So let's go and do the investigation. So we're essentially looking for the spoofer exe in our search query, and we're also looking for processes that are spawned, which is event 1, so the winlog event ID 1. And so we're just going to go and craft our query here, which is going to be winlog.event ID 1, and we will do spoofer.exe like that. And we have 2 hits out of the 40-something thousand. So what I'm going to do, I'm looking for specifically the path, right? So no, the command line value of the process that was spoofed by exe. So we will do the process command line, we'll do the parent process, we'll do the host name, and everything. I think those are like the key things that we need to put as our column selections. Okay, so we have, this is very interesting. This one obviously seems quite malicious because whatever this command is right here has been encoded, and I believe it's a base 64 encoding that has been done over here, and the process command line right here that we see is the Windows task spoofer, etc., etc. So what do I have? I have a full piece right here. It seems like just based on the formatting, it seems like it's actually the first option. So the first, the full command line value of the process that was spawned by spoofer exe. So the let's also do the process name and the parent process name. So the process name is going to be the thing that is spawned, and then the parent process in that case would be what has spawned it. So it says what was spawned by spoofer. So that would, spoofer in that instance would be the parent. So the process that's been, so spoofer spawned this thing right here, which is the reg server 32 exe or whatever. So in this case, PowerShell spawned spoofer, spoofer spawned this process. So this would be the command line that we have over here. And I'm just going to take that full thing. I wonder if that's actually the thing. I think that is it. Yeah, there we go. So then what is the name of the other service that was abused beside SNMP trap? The other service that was abused besides an SNMP trap. For this one, we need to look at that the SE impersonate, the impersonate privilege that we were looking at earlier in the notes over here. And that was associated with the event ID 13. And there's actually even a query that was available to us. So I'm going to just modify this right here to show event ID 13. And the modification for this was the registry path value that we had, and for that it showed us a series of responses. So I'm going to type this out real quick and let's see what we can find. So that's what we had, and there was actually a screenshot that was generated for this as well. So let me see, the registry path is correct, winlog event ID 13 is correct, HKLM backslashes system backslashes current needs to have 2 R's, so let's fix that. Okay, there we go. So now we have 20 hits for this, and the recommendations that they made was to have the host name, the the process name, the registry path, and the winlog event data details. So I do have the process name. I'm going to delete the parent process name over here. We do want to add the registry path, and we want to have the winlog event data details. Okay, and there is that. Now, based on the information that was gathered earlier in our notes, there was the SNMP trap that was abused using the update.exe. So I think that's another thing that potentially we can add over here. So if I do and update.exe, that might narrow this down to something. Yeah, so now we have 2 elements. So we have SNMP trap, and then there's spooler, which is the other one that was modified. And I'm only using update.exe because that's something that was established based on the earlier notes that we had. So there were modification of these image paths that were done using Bill Hawkins documents update.exe. So that was something that was provided to us based on some research that they had already done for us. So let's say our teammate did that research for us and they were able to grant us that information. And so that was it. And so the configuration for SNMP trap was that the binary for it was going to be forwarded to the update.exe. And from there is where the malicious processes started running and doing everything that update executable thing does. So for now, just getting the other process that was affected is the spooler. So let's see what we can find over here. So I'll do spooler. Cool, that is actually the answer. And now it says, what is the MD5 hash of the update.exe binary? So that's what we're trying to find in this particular case. So let's see how we can narrow that piece down. We want specifically to find the very first instance that we see of the update.exe. So I'm going to delete everything that we have over here for the registry and see what actually just shows up based on only update.exe. See how many different instances show up. So there's literally actually 2 instances only that show up for this thing. 2 situations, I guess, that show up for this. And I need to find the hash value because the process name that's running for this is services.exe. So I need to find the actual first instance, the first time that update.exe shows up. I can't imagine that it's only these 2 hits out of those 49,000. So I'm going to review the notes one more time, see if there's anything else that I may have potentially missed. If not, we'll just run with the information that we have here. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a different output here when we look at winlog event ID 1 instead of looking at winlog event ID 13. So event ID 1 being the ID for a process being created, that would be the specific event ID that actually generates most, and then it still has the update.exe as a part of it. So that's something that we could potentially use as some good information. So I'm going to add the process name one more time because I deleted it. So we have the process name. There we go. So we actually have some interesting things over here. So the first instance of it, because if we go chronologically, the ones at the bottom came first and then all of these come next, and these are the subsequent, the ones that come after the fact. So PowerShell is the process, CMD, SC, CMD, SC, and then the very first one right here is what we have for update.exe. So if I expand this, ideally, in a perfect world, that would be the one that actually has to do with this specific executable, and the MD5 hash value ideally would be the one that is assigned to that executable. So we're going to try this and see if we're actually right with that. And we are. How crazy is that? It's like, it's not overly complicated. Like when you kind of learn the overall flow of the investigation and what you're looking at and trying to pay attention to the goal of the question and what it is that you're trying to gather, it becomes a little bit easier to try to narrow it down. So the process name. So anytime that you see the process name, you can think about this event for this line item that you see right here has to do with this specific process. So everything for that line item, for that event, was spawned by whoami executable, right? So the hash value would belong to whoami executable. In this particular instance, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these ones that have been highlighted have to do with the same hash value that we just saw that we gathered on that very first item for the update exe. So if I go down here, let's see if that actually, and it does look like the same exact hash value 0BE. So the process name belongs to the actual process that initiated or spawned this specific event, this specific line item. So if you want to ever track down the hash value of something when they're asking for it, just know that you're looking for the actual process name. The parent process will not be the one that you're looking for. The hash value of the executable or the binary that ran it is the one that falls under process name. So now we can move on to the next tactic, which is the credential access tactic. Credential access is TA0006 in MITRE, and it involves the attacker's method to actually steal or discover account usernames and passwords, credentials, right, or the hashes of the passwords. This is very important for them, for the attacker, because it allows them to escalate their privileges, gain access to other systems or resources, and essentially move more closely to their objective, whatever their final objective is. And these are some of the techniques. Obviously, this is not all inclusive, because if we go to MITRE attack and look at credential access, where is it? I'm sure it's here right there. So boom, credential access, it has 17 techniques, or 17 technique categories, I should say. And then each one of these actually expand to show us even further technique categories that can be used. So again, this is not an all-inclusive list. Dumping credentials, enumerating files that contain credentials, dumping domain credentials, credential spraying or brute forcing, reusing discovered passwords, all of those things. So these are typically used to acquire necessary authentication and escalate access to the target system or the network. Once you have those credentials, you can masquerade as the authorized user, traverse the network, and even gain admin privileges given the right conditions. So they pave the way for the other tactics. So if you have right credentials, if you have appropriate elevated credentials, then it paves the way for everything else that you want to do. So lateral movement, privilege escalation, further deepening the extent of the compromise, persistence even, right? Because if you have admin privileges, you can start creating some scheduled tasks or attaching yourself to the startup binaries that every time the system boots, something launches in the background, and now you have that connection again to that system. So persistence is one of those big things, that something that somebody wants to do as an attacker, right? That's kind of like the big goal, to be able to regain access without actually having to go through the initial exploitation and getting your foot in the door, because they may have discovered what it is that you did the first time and then patch that, and now you can't regain access through that same entryway. So having persistence avoids that initial few steps that you have to take to actually get into the network or the system. So understanding this specific technique or tactic, I should say. So credentials in disk or memory. When you dump the LSAS via Mimikatz, or the creation of the LSAS dump file, listing account information in the Windows registry, or extracting the DP API credentials with Sharp DP API. All of this is the credentials that are stored in the disk or in the volatile memory. Then we have the credentials that are in files. So using the find string and then trying to find anything that has to do with password, for example, as the key phrase that you're looking for. Finding credential manager files, which is the key pass or the SSH keys, and then dumping browser credentials via Sharp, Chrome, or Firefox decrypt. All of these things, right? Domain credentials, dumping domain credentials via the DC sync or the accessing of the local administrator from LAPS, LAPS. Credential spraying, which really has to do with more of an attack of trying to either use a bunch of different usernames with one single password, or one username with a bunch of different passwords, essentially trying to access different systems, workstations, using a single account. This is what it means to spray the credentials and try to see where it hits. You're kind of just basically throwing it at the wall to see what's going to stick. It's kind of what credential spraying is. All of these things right here seem more of a targeted, kind of like a sniper approach, whereas this one is like a shotgun approach. So to summarize this tactic, or the tactic of the credential attack, focuses on obtaining new credentials in various ways to get further access to the network, and the attacker will target any host or network asset that contains credentials to proceed to the next attack step. So to be able to hunt for this, what we're trying to do is we're trying to recognize any of these specific activities. So the dumping host credentials from LSAS, dumping domain credentials via DC sync, or obtaining valid accounts via brute forcing. These are our key red flags that we're on the lookout for. So LSAS credential dumping would be in the winlog beat index, again for the same date. And after gaining the privileged access to a compromised host, the threat actor always tends to harvest more credentials and use them to move laterally, because, again, you might be able to find some compromised host inside of your investigation and then go and further investigate that user and try to lock them out or whatever it is. So as an attacker, as a hacker, it's a good practice to have multiple credentials that you can use to go ahead and regain access or persistence, whatever. One of the more prominent examples is dumping the LSAS credentials via Mimikatz. Another way is to simply create a dump file of the LSAS executable process, which contains in-memory credentials, and we can look for indicators of that. So hunting for Mimikatz, again, winlog event ID 1 for process creation. The process command line could be any of these things. So just the name Mimikatz with asterisk on the front and back end of it to imply that it could be any path that would refer to this, because it's rarely going to be just the name Mimikatz. So it could be anything that contains Mimikatz, or anything that contains dump creds, which is a command inside of Mimikatz, or privilege, debug, secure, sec URL SA. I think that's how you pronounce that. I usually call it secure LSA. I don't know if it's secure LSA or if it's sec URL SA, whatever. But these are all phrases or keywords that actually have to do with Mimikatz, or a command that is ran when you're inside of the Mimikatz tool. So all of these things are used in the command line query to dump credentials via Mimikatz. I basically said just this. I could have just read that, but that's what it is. So once you run this query, you want to kind of organize all of the output based on hostname, username, process command line, process name, process command line, or the parent command line, and then the process command line itself. And then you end up seeing things like this that actually have to do with, invoke Mimikatz, etc. So then based on that, we can see that there's been an attempt to dump the LSAS credentials from workstation 1, and they use PowerShell version of Mimikatz, which is the invoke Mimikatz.ps1. .ps1 always implies to a PowerShell script, which was downloaded from GitHub. So you could technically also even look for GitHub as a part of the domain that has been searched. So you could actually even do a search inside of your query for GitHub. And that's always a good practice as well, because a lot of times attackers will do that instead of actually downloading and installing Mimikatz, because it's like, that's just a big red flag. So then hunting the LSAS process dumping, and we can use Task Manager, or the threat actor can use Task Manager and create a process dump of the LSAS executable. This also leaves traces, which is kind of like the less preferred method from an attacker's perspective anyway. By default, dump files generated by Task Manager are written to the users and then the name of the user and an app data, local, and temp directory, and named using the format processname.dmp, DMP representing dump. So we'll hunt for any creations of that. So it could be the event ID 11, which would have to do with I want to say file creation. I believe that's what that is. Event ID 11 would be file creation. The file path would be anything that ends with lsas.dmp, because we know that the dump file for lsas would have something at the beginning of it, but it should end with lsas.dmp. And if you really don't know, if you aren't sure, you could just do *.dmp just in case the attacker was really smart and they changed the name of their dump file to something else. But for more often than not, they can't change the DMP part of it because that's the type of file that's generated when you create a dump file. So file creation of lsas DMP will have this kind of a query, and then these are the columns that we're going to organize with, and then we end up seeing that this is what's been generated, etc. And of course, Bill Hawkins is the freaking guy that was hacked. So the LSAS process created a file in app data local temp directory, and the attacker can use this dump file to retrieve stored credentials inside the LSAS process. Following a threat hunter mindset, the next step is to hunt for potential use of valid accounts harvested from the LSAS credential dump. Most likely, the authentication will come from the compromised workstation jumping to another workstation, since it serves as the pivot machine to reach other internal hosts. Moreover, it's good to trace back the events before the credential dumping activity, since it can only be done using a privileged account. The attacker was able to gain privileged access for the first before successfully executing the dump, right? So that's another key element to think about, right? So before credential dumping, they have to have some kind of access to a privileged account. Otherwise, they can't dump credentials because that's reserved for somebody who has higher privileges. So credential harvesting via DC sync for the domain controller, again on winlog beat for that specific date. Then we can go ahead and look at the DC sync command or the tool itself. So it abuses how domain controllers in an Active Directory network communicate and replicate data. Normally, domain controllers synchronize directory information, including password hashes, via the Directory Replication Service Remote Protocol, so MSDRSR. And the replication request to a domain controller requires these privileges. The replication get changes, replication get changes all, replicating directory changes all, and replicating directory changes in a filtered set. So only domain enterprise admins and domain controller machine accounts have these privileges by default. Using the Discover tab, we're going to hunt for this using this query, which is a pretty interesting query. It seems complex, but it's really not, because this whole piece is inside of the parentheses, which means essentially they've taken these I want to say these are their UIDs, their universal IDs. So they've taken their IDs essentially and put it inside the parentheses. So this whole one is like one block, and that belongs to the event data properties, the winlog event data properties. Then we have the event ID 4662, event data access mask 0 out of 100, and the rest of that. So we're going to use 4662 to hunt for events related to directory service object access, since we want to trace when a user attempts to access an Active Directory domain service. Moreover, we have translated the privileges into their corresponding GUID. I got it. Okay, so GUID, I was pretty close. And use it on the winlog event ID properties. Lastly, we have also added the access mask of 0x100, which is for control access, and this signifies that the user has enough privileges to conduct the replication. In addition, ensure that the following fields are added as columns to aid in the investigation, which is what we have over here. And then, of course, the actual answers have been blurted out because they want us to do the investigation, which I love. So it can be seen that backup ADM, which was one of the accounts that we found earlier, is attempted to do a DC sync attack. And this indicates that the discovered account is either a domain admin or enterprise admin, since the account was able to dump domain credentials from the DC01. Following the event generated, only typical event was logged as the DC01 machine account. So only one, it seems to be. To continue, we're going to investigate the backup ADM account by checking for any process creation event and a username being backup ADM, and kind of narrowing it down to these columns. And then we can see again some stuff generated. It says sort by timestamp ascending to actually see the, what do we see right here? It seems to be that this seems to be descending, because this is still the later event. So let me zoom in a little bit here. This is 1849, and then this is 1844. So it seems to be descending from what I gather, but whatever. We can see that the account has executed unusual commands through cmd.exe. It proves our suspicion that it may have been compromised. Following the mindset of the threat hunter, we want to hunt potential activities to achieve the objective. Having access to a domain admin, enterprise admin, allows them to do anything inside the compromised domain. It's also important to trace back how the account was compromised. So one possibility would be the credentials of backup ADM were harvested through LSAS credential dumping, which relates to the Mimikatz portion. And then brute forcing, again, Winlock. And then this is, again, just kind of looking through something that was repetitive failed logins. That could be one potential element. So it generates several failed attempts before successfully retrieving a valid credential. And we can look at the table index, which is winlog beat. The rows would be hostname, username, and the metrics would be count. And the KQL query, which is right here, 4625, is the windows to the event ID that is all failed logon attempts. So this is one of those key event IDs that if you see this a lot, if you see the number of counts, so for example, Jade Burke had 91 attempts to log in as Jade Burke. So when event ID 4625 that we see right here, that failed login event had 91 records that showed up for Jade Burke. So you can assume that Jade Burke had a brute force attempt done against their username. The number generated seems unusual and needs further investigation, and we can look at this information and use the Discover tab to expand. And honestly, when we look at this right here, Administrator by itself also seems to be brute forced, because we're looking at 1 day. We're literally looking at 1 day's worth of events. And if in one day, the domain controller administrator username had 15 failed login attempts, that is a red flag, because the administrator of a domain controller should be on top of their stuff. That person should not be having 15 failed login attempts. That's insane to think about. So we're going to then focus on this. So we're going to do the event ID 4625 and the username Jade Burke, because that was the one that had the 90 something events. And we can hostname, username, source IP, winlog event data, and then we can see where all of those attempts were actually done. And the logon type in this case would be 3, which is the network logon type. The source IP would be this, which is most likely the hacker's source IP address, or at the very least, like the proxy IP address that they're using for their C2 server, their command and control. And the account authenticating to a service from a network via SMB or WinRM. Sometimes these failed login attempts over network authentication are due to possible misconfiguration that prevents users from legitimately accessing shared resources over the network. So to confirm, we can go ahead and replace the KQL query with event ID 4624, looking for authentication attempts coming from this specific IP address. So 4624, username Jade Burke, and source IP being that IP address. 4624 is generated when a user has successfully authenticated in a workstation. So 4625 is failed login, and 4624 is when they actually successfully log in. And then we can see that there are 16 hits versus the 91 hits. So that says that workstation 1 was officially used to successfully log in with Jade Burke from that source IP address. And we can check the processes that were spawned by this user inside the workstation. So we can do workstation 1, winlog event ID 1 for process creation and username Jade Burke. And then we can see what processes were generated. There are 15 hits for that. And This proves the suspicion that the account of Jade Burke was brute forced and was successfully used to authenticate and execute. So the next step is to identify the impact of the commands that were executed by Jade Burke on the newly accessed machine. Moreover, it's also essential to determine how the source host of that was compromised. So what is the name of the process that created the LSAS DMP file out of the GUIDs to hunt it? What is the value of the GUID seen in the existing logs, and what's the name of the first process spawned by Jade Burke on workstation 1? So basically, we're kind of gonna go through everything that they did over here, because we're looking for the information that they blurred out, because that seems to be the information that essentially is what the answer to those questions are. So we'll start from the very, very top right here. I don't think we need to do this specific one, because we do know that there was some kind of a dump file that was created. So we can actually move on to this portion right here where we're trying to find the dump file. So we'll go ahead and delete this and update our events just to see I like when it breaks it down and it goes from 49,000 and it shrinks down to like whatever number of events. So we are looking for a file creation event, which is the event ID of 11. And then we're going to look for the file path, including anything that has to do with the lsas.dmp. I believe that's what the question is specifically asking, and it's literally one specific file, right? So they're asking for the lsas.dmp. I just want to make sure that's the file. So yeah, lsas.dmp. So it says, what is the name of the process that created it? And I already have it. So taskmanager.exe is the name of the project, the name of the process that created it. So taskmanager.exe, perfect. Out of the 4 GUIDs used to hunt the DC sync, what is the value of the GUID that's seen in our existing logs? So we'll go ahead and delete that one more time. And now we're looking for the one that it was that like really long query that had all of the different GUIDs for the creation, or what is it, for events related to the directory service, since we want to track the Active Directory domain service. So I'm going to kind of stay zoomed out because it's going to be a long one that I have to type. So let me go ahead and type this real quick. So cue the time lapse. All right, there it is. If I had to type these specific GUIDs one by one, believe me, I probably would have made a mistake and this would have taken forever. So we have narrowed it down. We have 37 hits out of everything that has happened. We need to look at the information that obviously is not even on here. So I'm going to get rid of the winlog username. I'm going to get rid of the process name. And what we are interested in is, of course, the host name. We want the time, of course. We want the winlog event data subject username, which is going to be right here. We also want the access mask for event data, and we want the properties for event data. So I'll do access mask right there, and then I will do the properties, and then we can then analyze the information. And they're looking for the one. It says, what is the value of the GUID that's seen in the existing logs that were done to hunt desync? So it can be seen that, what do we have? It seems to be that 1131 F6 and 9. So is it 1919? Is 1919 even one of them? I'm curious if 1919 is even one of them. So 1919 is not one of the GUIDs that we had. So it's the 1131. That is the one that actually shows up right here. When we look at all of these different events right here, it's only 1131 that actually shows up. So I will see if I can highlight this specific piece just by itself and then copy that. And then let's go out and paste that over here. And that should be our answer. Excellent. Very good. So what is the name of the first process that was spawned by Jade Burke on workstation 1? And that is going to be using this very last one that we had right here, which is the process that was spawned, which is the winlog event ID 1. So process creation. So workstation 1, winlog event ID 1, and of course the username Jade Burke. So I'm going to delete this whole thing again, and then we're going to type that thing out because that one's a little bit easier. And I can always copy paste. You can always copy paste this, but I prefer typing them out because I want it to get into my cells. I want it to get into my bones, so I know what I'm looking for and what field names are available, etc. So it's a personal preference, and this is why I actually speed through a lot of these things, because I don't want you to just get bored by seeing me type things. Thankfully, this one was a little bit quicker, so I don't have to do too much. So there we go. Now we have the workstation 1 asterisk for the host name, winlog event ID 1 for the process creation, and username is Jade Burke. There are 15 hits, and these information right here is not of use to us. The event data access mask and the properties, all of that stuff is not of use to us. What is of use to us is the process command line and the process parent command line, and I think they actually want the name of the process, so the name of the first process. So I can even just skip all of that and just do process name, which is available right here for me. And then we want the first process. So if we do chronological stuff, 52, 23, and 50, so they want the first one that's been spawned here, and it's WSM prov host exe. I feel like I should just copy that because I totally might misspell that. So go over here, go right there and do a paste, and then do click, and boom, we got it. Cool. So we have officially gotten all the information that we need from the credential portion of this task, and now we can move on to the lateral movement portion, which is the final portion of this. Lateral movement happens when the attacker wants to navigate the network and leverage the credentials and sessions that they gathered through their last stage to move around the network. And some of the tactics would be, or techniques, I guess, would be exploiting internal remote services, using legitimate administrative tools to access remote hosts, authenticating to workstations or servers using valid credentials, accessing sensitive information, and of course, you can just go to the MITRE attack framework, the matrix that we have over here, and it would be towards the latter, no pun intended, it would be towards the later portions of the tactics that are available. And of course, lateral movement has a series of different techniques under it, and some of these things expand to other ones as well. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done for lateral movement. So they allow the attacker to explore a network, find valuable assets, gain access to those assets, and exploit remote services. So that involves exploiting the vulnerabilities in those services to gain remote control over them. And legitimate administrative tools can be used to actually move through a network undetected as well. So that's the undetected part is the part that an attacker should be, at least. I don't know if they are focused on it, but they should be focused on moving around undetected, because lateral movement is kind of like towards the end, as we saw it right here. So it's like towards the end of their full-on attack, and it would really suck to be detected here before you can actually collect data or grab your command and control or exfiltrate data, etc. So that's one of the things that the undetected portion of it is very, very key. And if you're dealing with a really, really good hacker, they are very good at actually going undetected. So that's the other part. So understanding lateral movement in our case is the exploiting of the internal services. So internal servers running vulnerable applications and services like web applications, printers, email services, domain controllers, legitimate administration tools like PSExec, Windows management instrumentation, PowerShell remoting, or remote desktop applications. These are all legit tools that can be used, and they don't really raise red flags of any kind. Plain text passwords from credentials discovered, or using pass the hash or pass the ticket. And that's actually the one that I clicked on right here, which is pass the hash, pass the ticket, web session cookies or application access tokens, all of those to authenticate using dumped hashes. And to authenticating to file, database, and cloud storage servers would be accessing the sensitive information. So the tactic focuses on pivoting from one host to another. That's what lateral movement means. So think about vertical movement, right? Vertical movement would be going to an escalated account and gaining higher privileges. Lateral movement means going side to side, right? So you just want to move from one to the next because user A may be fully secure. They may have really good practices for not leaving any sensitive information in their documents or their desktop or in their source code or anything like that. User B, not so much. User B could leave plain text passwords inside of a sample script that they've created, and they forgot to delete them, or they forgot to encrypt them, or use something like the SSH or not SSH. I think it is not SSH. What am I saying? It's the SSL, like some kind of SSL certification or SSL encryption to actually protect the passwords. Hard coding passwords inside of a script is like a really big deal. It's like one of those common practices that it's like, dude, it's a secure practice. You can put an input command that prompts you to enter your password every time you run the script. Even if you don't want to encrypt your password, at the very least, you can use some kind of an input prompt that will prompt you to enter your password instead of you hard coding it inside of the source code. You know what I'm saying? So again, I'm kind of digressing. I'm going off of these tangents here, but these are the things that leave somebody vulnerable. And these are the practices that an attacker is looking for when they do lateral movement, because they want to see if they can find easy credentials, right? So accessing all these things, they can further their illicit activities, whatever it may actually be. So hunting for this, we're looking for a specific few red flags in our particular case. It's the lateral movement via the WMI, which is the Windows Management Instrumentation, which is, again, it's actually a legitimate tool, right? And then we have the authentication via pass the hash, which is, it's not as bad as brute forcing, definitely. But when you do pass the hash kind of authentication, it does raise some kind of an eyebrow or some kind of a concern where it's like, okay, what is this person doing exactly? Why are they doing pass the hash to authenticate as somebody else? You know what I mean? So via WMI, we're going to be using the winlog beat, looking for that specific date, and the actor would actually move laterally after gaining valid credentials from a compromised host by using credentials harvested from the initially compromised host. There are many ways to do this, but we're going to focus on WMI. It's used for system administration, monitoring, configuring, management, automation tasks, and threat actors can also use it to execute commands remotely and establish access to remote targets. An indicator of WMI usage is the execution of the WMI PRV SE-EXE. So this is an executable, another binary that's used, a process that's used, and this will spawn a child process if WMI is used to execute commands remotely. So based on this, we can look for process creation and the parent name being the WMI PRVSE executable. Then we're going to look for hostname, username, parent command line, and the process command line, and we'll get some kind of information. None of these things have been blurred out, so I guess they're not directly relevant to the questions that we have later on. We can see that the executable, the parent executable, has spawned multiple instances of the command line on workstation 1 using Clifford Miller. So we have moved on from the last guy. The command executed through this command line has an unusual pattern, which seems that it's writing the executed command's output on the admin or C Windows directory. And the pattern of cmd.exe, and then this is the full command that you see right here, is attributed to the impackets WMI executable Python, which is a known tool for lateral movement. And it confirms our suspicion of the events that are generated for the PSC. Let me actually make sure that I extend my time, because I don't want to get kicked out here. That would suck, because we're almost at the end. And imagine we finish the exercise and then we get kicked out. That would really suck. So let's go ahead and also go to split view and increase the timer on our attack box, so that also doesn't crash on us, because that's also a pain in the butt. And then again, something else, that when I have this open inside of a secondary window, it doesn't automatically open or update the timer on the secondary window, and then I get kicked out of the secondary window. And then this window right here thinks that I was also kicked out. And it's like, bro, come on, dude. What's up, dude. Why are you even... Anyways, I'm talking to the computer now, and I'm losing my mind, it seems. Where were we? So we're looking at the WMI parent, and we're looking at the children, the child processes that were used, and the WMI exec Python is what's used for lateral movement. Then we can look that we can confirm the suspicion that the events generated by WMI PRVSE executable. So to continue, we're going to go look at the authentication event of Clifford Miller to workstation 1. And we can use the view surrounding documents to hunt for that event. And based on that, we're going to look for the hostname workstation thread hunting. Click the plus button beside it to actually add it as a filter. So you can add filters essentially by looking at any value and then just clicking the plus button that's next to it, and you could add it as a filter. So in this case, the hostname workstation thread hunting, workstation 1 inside of the thread hunting domain, username Clifford Miller, and then the event ID 4624 to add as a new filter. So that you would actually have to add manually yourself by clicking this add filter button that we see right here. Let me see if I zoom in right here, right at the top of everything. If you look at it right here, and what happened right here at the top of everything, there's this add filter button, and then I'll show you how to do that. If we have to do that, we'll do that, but it's not hard to do. So you would just look for the field, and then you would give it the value, and 4624 is the proper authentication. So they were able to successfully log in. They were successfully authenticated themselves. And when we look at that, we get this data that's available to us over here, and it gives the parent process command line and the process command line. So we can inspect the event before the execution of that parent process, which is now available here for our view. If you do the drop down button, you get to see all of the information inside of it. So in this particular case, the logon information we have, which is the logon type, the new logon that's done by Clifford Miller in the thread hunting domain, and the workstation name and the IP address. So the source IP address that we have on the source port, which is 52,787. That just seems like a freaking suspicious port. Logon type 3 indicates that it's a network logon, so they did over a network connection, and it came from this IP address. Now we have a potential source of attack, and we can look at it further. So we can go to the IP address on workstation 1 and use that as an extra filter to try to see what else we can do. Pass the hash would be another one that's on WinLogBeat on July 9th. And pass the hash is basically when you don't have the plain text password, but you have been able to capture the hash value using some kind of a dump credential tactic. And then you can just pass that hash value. Instead of using the plain text password, you can just pass the hash as a password and be able to gain unauthorized access to a system without knowing their actual password. Authentication protocols like NTLM store and use password hashes instead of plain text passwords. And there's a lot of different authentication protocols that also use password hashes. And then after this kind of an attack was discovered and documented, they stopped using hashes as authentication protocols, and they started doing tickets and ticket granting services, which is a whole other conversation, but it's a more secure version of authentication compared to NTLM. So the technique might be challenging, but there are different ways to detect the use of pass the hash while authenticating remotely. And these are some of the things. So 4624 is the successful authentication. Logon type 3 would be a network logon. Process name would be NTLM SSP. The key length would be 0, and key length 0 indicates that there was nothing entered there. Using the Discover tab, we're going to look at this query. So the event ID, WinLog event data type 3, which is the network, WinLog logon process name, which is the NTLM, and asterisk before and after it, and the key length of 0. Then we want to narrow down host and username, and we will see what we have over here. So the host name is the computer, obviously. Clifford Miller, Jade Burke, Anonymous, logon is one that's over here. and then there's another one for Jade Burke as well. And then it can be observed that 2 users, including the anonymous logon, which is the false positive apparently, they potentially authenticated via pass the hash. Moreover, it can be seen that the authentication of Clifford Miller came again from the presumed compromised workstation, which is the 184.105 IP address over here. So to continue, we're going to focus on Clifford Miller, and we're going to look at the surrounding documents. We're going to add workstation 1 as the filter, Clifford Miller as another filter, and event ID 1 as a new filter for process creation. And then we get to see the process names that have been generated on this side. It can be seen that multiple CMD executions were made, and the expansion of those logs to investigate further, so we can see the process arguments that were ran inside of it. So let's go in a little bit right here. So we can see WMI PRVSE has been executed, the CMD exe with a bunch of different flags. We have the loopback domain that we have over here on the local machine. And I feel like the options right here are, I think, what makes it specifically. These seem to be commands that are being run. So it's changing directory to these various directories using the command line. Those seem to be the commands that are actually run inside of the CMD executable. So it seems the event is related to WMI exec from the previous investigation, and it confirms the suspicion of the pass the hash from by Clifford Miller, since WMI exec.py can use hashes to authenticate and execute commands. So combining 2 unusual subsequent events increases the likelihood of this suspicious activity. And following our threat hunter mindset, we can identify the extent of this attack by checking the subsequent process creation event after detecting pass the hash. It's essential to understand this IP address was compromised in the first place, which allows the attacker to pivot to workstation 1. So these are our questions here. We have 3 questions. What's the name of the account that also used WMI exec on workstation 1 aside from Clifford Miller? Executing the false positive account, or excluding the false positive account, how many events were generated by potential pass the hash authentication? Excluding the executions of CD command, what is the full command line value of the subsequent process spawned after the first successful pass the hash authentication of Clifford Miller? So let's start from the very top here. What's the account that also used WMI exec on workstation 1? You know, I am curious, before we actually run it, I feel like this is actually available in this is the screenshot right here, and none of these things were blocked out, and this was something that they provided to us for successful authentication that happened over the network, and the process name NTLM, and of course the key length of 0. And these were things that potentially used pass the hash after they established that the WMI exec was spawned by this WMI PRV SE executable. So the logons that we have over here are Clifford Miller, Jade Burke, and the anonymous login. So it says other than Clifford Miller. So I'm going to try Jade Burke. Okay. So there we go. That's available right there. That's the answer. If you wanted to find it, you could go ahead and just run the commands that they gave us over here, like the filtering commands. What was the first query, which is looking for the process creation event and the process parent name being WMI PRVSE. And from there, we would be able to gather this. And based on the 27 hits, we can go ahead and narrow it down by looking at the surrounding documents of one of the events that they chose. So let's analyze the closest authentication of Clifford Miller to workstation 1. So they use the username to workstation 1, the first authentication, which is what that what is it right here? We have it right here, the WMI PRVSE executable secured embedding, and there was the command execution that this piece right here implies was done using that Python file that they were talking about. So this is from where they gathered that this specific event is probably somebody trying to authenticate as Clifford Miller. So they would look at the surrounding documents and then they created further filters. So workstation 1 threat hunting. I feel like I should just do this just to show it to you instead of stealing the information based on what they had for us onto the screen. So I'm going to do it because I do also want to show you how to create those filters that they did, where they were like, yeah, just add this as a filter and move on from there. So the first thing that at the very top that we want to do is we just want to narrow down the events based on that parent process. So it's the winlog event ID of 1. So let me see, let's go, actually it's a lowercase id is 1, and the process parent name is going to be the wmiprvse.exe, like that. So we'll go over here, and we do have autofill for this as well. So as long as you're close to the spelling, it'll help you with the autofill. So we'll do that and then press enter, and it'll take from 47 or 49,000 and it'll go to 27 hits. Now, to be able to make this make sense, we need to get the appropriate fields here. So we do have the process name, which I guess isn't that important because we want to look for the process command line that will allow us to see the contents of that Python file. So if you remember, the Python file has a specific series of options or commands that are run inside of it. And so we have the process command line, and then we'll also add the parent process command line over here as well. So we have that over there. And if we go and look at what the contents of it are, so this piece right here, right? So QC asterisk, all of this is attributed to the WMI execution Python, a known tool for lateral movement. So this confirms this suspicion. You would not know this unless you had a good amount of experience with these lateral movement investigations, or you just made a note of it and you have a document that stores potential attacks for lateral movement. So if you don't know it off the top of your head, it's a good idea to literally copy this and put it inside of a Word document and put it under the category of lateral movement techniques and be able to use it like that. So once we do this query, we can then see, based on these 27 hits, there's these process command lines that are being run. So QC, and then this element right here was previously an asterisk. So that implies that anything that is put in between these things is an actual command that the person is running for lateral movement. So CD to a location, then who am I as I'm here, etc. And then they're running these various commands. And so this one is a PowerShell command that's being run by downloading the GitHub script for Mimikatz, etc. So this is it, right? So now once we have this information, it says we want to try to see where all of this stuff gets narrowed down. So we'll go into any of these and we're going to look at the surrounding documents. So I'm going to expand this specific event. I'm going to go surrounding documents, and now we're taken to a whole different page. Now what we can do is we can add certain things to the query, to the filters. So we want to add workstation 1. Now in this particular case, I don't even have workstation 1, so I need to go back to my previous list and look at the one that has to do with workstation 1. So I'll even do this. I'm going to do and then I will do the host.name is going to be workstation-1, and then I'll do asterisk, and it should narrow it down a little bit more. So now I have workstation 1, and then I can expand any of these, go to view surrounding documents, and now I can add workstation 1 as a filter. So when we highlight any of these, you can see it right here, right? So there's this plus sign, filter for value, and now it gets added up here, hostname workstation 1, okay? And then I can go to username if the username was even over here, and I didn't have the username over there. So since I don't have the username over here, it's actually a great opportunity to show you how to add a filter. So I'll click on add a filter, but essentially if I did have the username column as well, I could just go to the next to the username that I wanted to add and just press that plus sign, and it would add that filter. So since I don't have the usernames here, I'm just going to click on add filter, and now it says which field do you want to first add. So when you click on that, you get to actually type the name. So I'll do username and then click that, And then the next one is, what do you want the username to be? I want the username to be, so username is, and then I'm going to say Clifford.Miller, and then add that, and there we go. And now we're going to save it, and now it's going to filter that down for us. And even though we don't see the username column here, we can rest assured because it did actually filter it down for us, and we saw there was a change on this page that was made. And the final one is the WinLog event ID filter. So we will do that as well. So we're going to go over here. It's going to be winlog.event ID that we can see right here. That is going to be, what did I just do? WinLog event ID. I'm misspelling everything right now. Event underscore ID. There we go. Oh, I see. It's winglog. There is no such thing as winglog. So winlog event ID is, and it's going to be the 4624, which is the successful authentication. So we're going to do that and then save that. And now we have a series, and it says only 2 documents newer than the anchor should actually be found or could be found. And so this is essentially it. This is exactly what we had previously on our list of screenshots and everything, which was this piece right here. So I'm going to show you, or I've gone too far, it seems. So view surrounding documents. This is what we see over here, and this is what we see over here. We just don't have the username being displayed here, so we don't actually know if it is. But if we zoom in right here, we can see the secured embedding and then the command itself. And so if I go over here, I can see the secure embedding and then the command itself. So I know that I did this right. So now it says that we can inspect the event log before the execution of this, which is the log below the current view. So we can go and the log below it. So they're looking at the one that has which timestamp. It doesn't show me the timestamp on theirs. So let's see which one it was that they viewed. I had to go down to the very, very bottom event. So this is the very first event from the bottom. When we expand that one and go down into the message portion of it, we can see that it's still the event type is, or the logon type is 3. We can still see that it's Clifford Miller that's being logged in with. But if we go down to the network section right here, network information, we can see that it's 10.10.184.105 and 54.556. So that's how we were able to gather that information that they have over here in this screen. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and narrow down again by building a query for the successful authentication, the event data type 3, and then the logon process name, NTLM, and then the key length of 0, and we should be able to gather these usernames that are available. So I'm going to go back to my page to actually be able to create my query, and from there we will create that query to be able to hunt down login event type 3, etc. So let's wipe this out right here, go back to our 49,000 events, and then we will now type the successful logon query. Okay, so cool, there we go. We got it, and this is the query. And I mean, it's no different than what we actually saw on the screen right now. 4624 for successful authentication, type 3 for the logon through a network. Logon process name is the NTLM with the asterisk on the front and the back of it, and of course the event data key length being 0. It narrows it down to 12 hits for us. I need to get rid of the process command line and the parent process command line. I am interested in the username, and I am also interested in the what is the other field? The host name. So that's basically it. So this is what we got. So we got Jade Burke, anonymous login, and Clifford Miller. So Jade Burke, anonymous login, Clifford Miller. And that's how we ended up with this answer. So I did all of that to show you the process for finding that answer, but it was literally on the screenshot that they provided to us. So now, excluding the false positive account, how many events were generated by potential pass-the-hash authentication? So one of the ways that we can just guarantee this, it's 12 hits, so it's not that big of a deal to just count through it. But we can, again, go over to the add filter button right here, and we can say user.name, right? And then now we can say user.name is not, and then give it that value, which is the anonymous login. And it's actually the very first one. So boom, and then save that. And now it's going to narrow it down, remove the anonymous logon. And now it says we have 10 hits excluding that. So we'll do 10, and there's the answer. And finally, excluding the executions of the cd command, what is the full command line value of the subsequent process spawned after the first successful pass the hash authentication of Clifford Miller? So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to add right here, we'll do and user.name is Clifford.Miller, and it'll only show us these three. And so it says, what is the full command line value of the subsequent process spawned after the first successful pass the hash authentication of Clifford Miller? So to find this one, we actually need to narrow down our search, or actually completely modify our search according to some of these instructions that we had here, right? So we know that this was the malicious IP address, and we know that after we kind of narrow down for that malicious IP address, there's going to be the process creation event that we're very interested in. So I can just change this process creation event number 1 to process 1. The winlog event type, I'll leave at 3. Let's see if anything even shows up over there. It seems to be nothing is going to show up over there. So I'm going to delete all of these portions, because the NTLM part and the key length and all of those things I think are irrelevant. We'll keep the username as Clifford Miller, and we get 88 hits in this particular case. And so winlog event ID of 1, username Clifford Miller 1, and we do want the source IP address to also be 10.10.184.105. So I'm going to copy this over here as well, and go here and do a and I'll do source.ip equals this piece right there. Press enter, and nothing is available for that. So let's see what I could potentially do to make this work for us. The instructions tell us to essentially just look at Clifford Miller's first log entry using the surrounding documents feature. So right after this piece right here, which is before I really modified any of those things. So I can go back to this one right here and go back one more. So after this one, we can see after all of these, after the first log entry, we're looking for the command line value, I think is the piece that they're looking for, right? So it says, what is the full command line value of the subsequent process that was spawned? So I'm just going to add the process command line just in case. For whatever reason, it may not, oh, it's not even in there. So let's see, command, that's not even in there either. So I'm going to delete this filter that I have over here, leave that right there. We're going to look at the very first one that was executed right here. We'll expand this. We're going to look at the surrounding documents for this, and we want to go and narrow it down based on some of the filters that they provided. So they said, look at it for the hostname workstation 1 threat hunting, which is right here. So I'll just add that as a filter. The next one is username Clifford Miller, add that as a filter. So we'll put that over there. And then finally, winlog event ID 1. So we'll go ahead at the top right here, and we'll add a new filter, and we're going to go here and we'll do the winlog event ID, and then it's going to be is, and the value will be 1. And from there, we will narrow this down, and we'll have these events right here. And the very first, right, full command line value of the subsequent process after the first successful pass the hash authentication. So if I assume, right, so older documents, I mean, these were the ones that I'm just going to assume that these are the fresh ones. So if this is the first one, the next one would be subsequent. So that would be the subsequent. And if we go over here and try to find the command line value of that, so let's see what we can find. Okay, so I'm going to try something here just to just to see if it'll be a little bit easier to parse through all of this data, because to expand each one of these and then try to find the process command line, it's a little bit tedious. So I'm going to click on this right here, the discover button, and then these filters are already going to be applied to us. So the workstation is still 1, username is still Clifford, winlog event ID is still 1 for process creation, and I added a new one for process name, the CMD, because it's a command line execution. We have 19 hits in total, okay? I'm going to add the process command line field that's available here, and it's now going to organize everything for us like so, right? So it's essentially saying, using Clifford Miller, what is the subsequent process after the first successful pass the hash authentication. So if we see this program files elastic packet beat CMD setup, configuration, so on and so forth, after CD, right? So after these CDs, after these CDs, and if you remember, this is actually what that Python file kind of starts everything with, right? So this is the very first one after the CD commands. So I'm going to copy that and go here, and we're going to zoom out because I have a feeling that would be the right answer. So in case it is the right answer, it's going to give us a completion message. Is it right? Is it right? It is right. Congratulations on completing the thread hunting pivoting challenge, or room, I guess. So I am very excited that we were able to finish that, and in all honesty, I think that was a really good one. Really, I was hoping that I would be able to do it without researching too much, and thankfully I was able to do that. So I'm very, very excited about that fact, specifically just from my own personal experience. Hopefully you actually were able to gather as much value from it as I was able to get, and all of it made sense. I did the very best that I could to explain everything in as clear of a way as possible for you. And we'll just review real quick what we did, right? So in the very, very first task, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, right, all of these things kind of compiled on top of each other. So the information that we gathered from the discovery investigation fed directly into the information that we needed to gather, or we used that information. For example, the backup ADM account actually showed up later on, right? And the privilege escalation information that we were able to gather through that investigation, that also showed up as we continued on from our investigation. So the spooler or the update exe binary portion, that showed up as we went through the rest of it. Essentially, all of these things stack on top of each other. The investigation feeds into the next piece, because when somebody attacks you, they have to go through discovery, privilege escalation, access credentials, lateral movement. These are the steps that they have to take. So as they take these steps, you are following along that path to see what they did exactly and where all of those gaps in the security were that they were able to take advantage of, so you can patch every single one of those gaps in security. And this is one of the key pieces. I think it's the key piece to take away from all of these threat hunting investigations that we do, and incident response, digital forensics. Anything that you do in this realm, you need to understand that it's a step-by-step that they had to take, the attacker had to take. Therefore, it's a step-by-step that you need to follow. And once that clicks, it's like, okay, so I'm just using the information that I gathered from this step to feed into the next step and to feed into the next step. You can't use the information that you gathered from discovery to try to answer the questions in lateral movement. It's very important. It's a step by step. So discovery will help you into the privilege escalation step. That'll help you into credential access. That'll help you into lateral movement, right? But you can't jump from A to Z. That's the thing that I think some people, I'm not going to say most people, because I don't know really. I don't know how many investigations people in the real world have gone through, or maybe you have gone through, that you're trying to figure out how it works. So I would presume that some people try to jump the gun and try to find the very, very last thing, when in actuality, you need to go step by step to follow along what they did specifically, and then cover every single hole that's inside of the infrastructure, fix all of those patches, or patch all of those vulnerabilities, I should say. So very cool room. I was very, very excited about this one. I really thoroughly enjoyed this one. And I'm very much excited to go into the next piece, because in addition to this one, I think there's actually another one that we do get to follow along with as well in the threat hunting conversation. So let me go ahead and just close my attack box real quick, and now we can go look at the threat hunting module. And yeah, we do have one more, which is the end game piece, and then I think we're going to go through some actual capture the flag type exercises. We're going to go through some investigations, probably not with a lot of instructions the way that they gave us in these rooms that we went through. In those rooms, they kind of spoon fed everything to us. In the other two, we're going to have to go through the investigation ourselves, which is hopefully going to be very fun and valuable to you as well as me, because I really love learning new stuff as we go along together here. Also, as well, yes, me too. I like it too. I enjoy going through all of this as well. So hopefully you got value out of this one. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you found this video useful and you would like to get more videos like this one, including all the stuff that's going to come out in SOC Level 2 for the rest of the SOC Level 2 pathway, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out on this channel, especially when it has to do with SOC Level 2. If you have any questions about what we went through today, please drop a comment. If you just want to say hi, or if you want to clarify something, make sure that you drop a comment. This is something that I pay attention to. I'm very responsive in the comment section, so I do want to make sure that you get your question answered, just in case for whatever reason I didn't cover it in good enough detail inside of the contents of this video. So make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out on this channel, especially for SOC Level 2. If you're serious about your CySec training and want access to me on Discord, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, or you can go to youtube.com/@HankHacksHackers/join, and you will be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. I hope I see you in the Discord chats. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section. And that is it. It's your boy Hank Hackers, and at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker/protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I'll see you in the next video later.